Okay, assalamu alaikum. Hope you are well, wherever you are. Let's have a look and see who we have. All right. Assalamu alaikum, Roti. Hope you're well. Adriana, good to see you. And Harun. Assalamu alaikum, Harun. Good. Yo, Kurz is here. And this is a new one. A crazy dummy. Well, salam. Hope you're well. All right. I've got quite a bit of a and salam Muhammad as well. I've got a bit of a long presentation today, so let me just jump right into it. Here we go. All right, okay. So the mercy of hell, which is might seem like a strange title, but I thought I'd just give some thoughts on a couple of things with regards to this. Let's see, because I wrote these notes earlier this morning, so I'm not too sure about them. Okay, so let's look at these verses here. So if you remember, we talked about this last time, the last stream, about why would God destroy a people, right? Why would God destroy a community or people? And one thing we noted, of course, was that the verses which speak about this always speak about small communities, qarya, from village or township. And I mentioned my what we call in Arabic tahleel, my sort of reasoning why God does destroy peoples, which is when they go beyond a certain point of no return, where it just becomes where the people will no longer reform, and so it will be unjust to allow that community to continue and for new generations to be born into it and be corrupted. Anyway, one of the verses we mentioned in that was this: وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ لِيُهْلِكَ الْقُرَى بِظُلْمٍ وَأَهْلُهَا مُصْلِحُونَ. And your Lord would not have destroyed the cities unjustly, or you can read it also by destroyed the people, the cities or communities by the injustice, due to the injustice, while their people were reformers. So if a community is reforming and is still capable of reforming, at least, then God would not destroy them, would not do away with them. Okay, they're not a failed sort of section of humanity. Within those verses, though, if you go to Surah Hud, at the end of Surah Hud, after a little while after these verses, there's a couple of other verses which basically point to what I want to speak about. So a few verses later, this verse is 117. The next verse says, looks like I deleted a part of the verse here. It should be وَلَوْ شَاءَ in here. وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ لَجَعَلَ النَّاسَ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً. And if your Lord had willed, he could have made mankind one community, but they will not cease to differ. Okay? وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ. What does that mean? وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ لَجَعَلَ النَّاسَ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً. That if Allah had willed, he would have made everybody one people. It means then it would be his will. He would impose that by his own will, so there'd be no free will. Okay, it would be by his free will, meaning not our free will anymore, not our choice anymore. It wouldn't be our choice to differ. That some of us would choose right, some of us would choose wrong. It would be God imposing that upon us. لو شاء ربك لجعل الناس أمة واحدة. Right? That by virtue of the free will that humanity has, they will always be differing. There will always be some people on the right, some people on the wrong, some people following their self-interests, their and causing injustice, and some people committed to righteousness. That would always be the case. The only way that would not be the case is if God were to impose his will on humanity in that kind of way, be forced. Okay? So had God willed, he could have done that. Okay? Then there would be no need to divide people or communities of the past into those who were just, committed to justice, or those who were at least reforming, versus those who were unjust and who would never reform and were incapable of reforming and so were destroyed. That would not have happened, right? If God had willed. Instead, though, everyone would be one ummah, okay, in goodness and in justice by the imposition of his will on all of humanity. Okay? But instead of that, humanity will continue to differ. Some keeping to goodness and justice, or at least reforming from injustice, and some unjust and past the point of no return and the failed section of humanity, and so destroyed. Right? So that's the relevance, I believe, to the previous verse, right? وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ لِيُهْلِكَ الْقُرَى بِظُلْمٍ وَأَهْلُهَا مُصْلِحُونَ. And your Lord would not, it would not be, it isn't for your Lord or befitting for your Lord to destroy a city or cities or communities while their people are reformers or reforming or changing their ways. Okay? So this verse follows on from that. وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ لَجَعَلَ النَّاسَ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً. Right? If God had willed, he would have made all of mankind one nation in goodness, right? And so you would not have different communities, right? Where some communities God would destroy, and others who would be reforming or who are doing good, he would not destroy. That would not happen. But instead, God doesn't impose his will, and so mankind will differ. Okay? And then the next verse is really the crux of half at least of what I want to say. It says إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ رَبُّكَ. So following on from this, and some of the like in Qalun, in the recitation of Qalun, they would make these two verses as one verse, right? Where the verses end or don't end is something that there are different counts on that, right? Where does one verse end or where does another one start? But whether you consider this to be one verse or not, it's obviously the next part follows on from it. وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ. And they will not cease to differ. إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ رَبُّكَ. Except whom your Lord has given mercy. وَلِذَلِكَ خَلَقَهُمْ. And it is for that he created them. Okay, it is for that he created them. What does that mean? It means people, all people, right? It doesn't just mean those who are following the righteousness, right? All the people, all of these people who differ, both those who are will go to hell or will ultimately be destroyed, and the righteous, all of them, God created them for his mercy. إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ رَبُّكَ وَلِذَلِكَ خَلَقَهُمْ. Right? God created all of them, all of mankind, all people were created for his mercy. Okay, God created people, mankind, for his mercy. Okay, that was God's intent. But some would differ from that, would cause disputes and turbulence and ultimately injustice. Okay, injustice to themselves and others. And so the completion of that mercy, when Allah says here in this verse, إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ رَبُّكَ وَلِذَلِكَ خَلَقَهُمْ, and the rest of the verse goes, وَتَمَّتْ كَلِمَةُ رَبِّكَ لَأَمْلَأَنَّ جَهَنَّمَ مِنَ الْجِنَّةِ وَالنَّاسِ أَجْمَعِينَ. Right? And but the word or the decree of your Lord has been fulfilled, is to be fulfilled. Okay, وَتَمَّتْ كَلِمَةُ رَبِّكَ, I will surely fill hell with jinn and men altogether. Okay, now what has that got to do with mercy? Because it's part of God's mercy for those who are victims of the injustice, who are victims of oppression, who are victims from tyranny. It is part of God's mercy to them that the others, the tyrants, the oppressors, the cruel, be punished. Okay, so the completion of mercy for those who are victims of oppression, those are on the receiving end of tremendous injustice, is that there will be a hell that will be, will be just big enough to be filled by the oppressors. And I mentioned this in another stream that I think it was called "The Sides of Hell" or something like this. These verses where God is saying He will fill hell up. People take these in a sort of backwards way, as if God is intent on filling hell. That He has this hell, He's already pre-made this huge hell, and He's just going to make sure by hook or by crook, He's going to fill it up with people. It isn't that way. It is that the hell was created just enough for the amount of the oppressors and the tyrants, right? Hell is mentioned as being smaller. That was, I think, that the stream was called that, "The Size of Hell," or that hell is smaller, or something like this, right? Hell is mentioned as being mobile in the Quran, as being moved around, right? It doesn't seem like it's that big. Whereas comparatively, Jannah is mentioned to be, the width of the heavens and the earth, right? So when God says, "I'm going to fill hell up," okay, it's not because hell is huge and He's going to make sure He fills that up. It's because hell is not as big as that. He only created as much hell as is needed, right? Think of it sort of that way. So when I said that in this title, that the mercy of hell, it is a mercy. It's a mercy for the victims, right? And that the cruel should be punished, the tyrants, be made to fear, the oppressors be brought low. All that is a mercy. It's a mercy for the victims. Justice is a mercy to those who are wronged. Okay. It's also a mercy to everybody else, because the victims of tyrants and oppressors could have been any of us, right? We could all have been the victims of such brutality. Okay, under different circumstances. Any of us could have been born in Gaza, right, in Gaza, in the past 75 years or thing. That the people who are there now, trapped there, adults who are living there now, have known nowhere else, right? You've got 30-year-old people, 25-year-old people who have never left it, right? This very small piece of land, under constant bombardment and harassment, and witnessing atrocities after atrocities. That could have been any of us. Okay, so the punishment being given to oppressors, it's for the sake of all of us. It's for the sake of all of us, because any of us could have been on the receiving end of that oppression. Okay, it is a mercy because there has been, and there always will be those who commit true evil. Okay, that has to be understood. So that's basically the thing which I wanted to mention on one side. Another thing which I wanted to mention is I put in the description of this video a link to somebody sent me this link of one of these Salafi scholars answering a question, a caller, somebody from India or Pakistan. She was telling the Salafi scholar that she has a lot of doubts about, she started to really doubt Islam. And one of them was, of course, was this question of, we'll come to the question, but it comes down to people having this undeserved sympathy, this undeserved sympathy from the naive, from people who are naive or basically just ignorant about the reality of it, towards the denizens of hell, right? And that people have this sympathy for those who will enter hellfire. It's a completely misplaced sympathy, completely misplaced. Those who would enter hell, right, which is not easy, they don't deserve any sympathy at all. They don't deserve any sympathy. To get into hell, you really have to be the lowest of the low. Okay, we're not talking about just an atheist, and that's the problem. That's part of the problem, that people have been led to believe these sort of things. That the average Joe who just doesn't believe in God, he's going to go to hell. That isn't the case at all. We're going to come back to that in a minute. But anyway, so just like this sort of undeserved sympathy that's being given, it's sort of like I put here, it's like the activists against the death penalty, okay, who have lived all their lives in safety and security, okay. There are some that feel sorry for the denizens of hell in the same way. So just like some people feel sorry for a criminal who's going to be put to death, they feel sorry because in the moment, that's what they see. Okay, in the moment, what they see is this human being, who's going to be killed, and to them, that's almost like murder, right? What they're not seeing is the crime, right? Their focus is shifted to the sympathy for the criminal, right? And it's gone away from sympathy towards the victim and the victim's family and the whole life that was taken away. Okay, that undeserved sympathy also exists, I think, in how some people view hell and those who will enter hell. Okay, it is due to ignorance and being far removed from the reality. Okay, had they known, they would know that those who end up in hell are those who deserve no sympathy at all. I mean, if you really knew, they're not the people who you would have sympathy for at all, right? But the problem is that people who have this sympathy for those who will enter hell, they are far removed from them. They are far removed from their crimes, from their cruelty, from their oppression, from everything that they've done, right? And they just sort of intellectualize that there's some everyday people that they see in their lives. These are the people who are going to go into hell, and so they have this sympathy for them, which is not true. Okay, the anti-death penalty activists only see the criminal in front of them. They don't see the crime. Okay, they don't see the murder of the innocent. And the innocent concern is to prevent another murder. That's how they see it, right? And in the same sort of way, some people look at that the people will enter hell, and they see that as an injustice towards them, right? As it could be an injustice towards them. Okay, so in the same way, you find this false sympathy by some for those who will be in hell. Okay, and part of the cause of that is, I think, the religious abuse of nearly every religion or sect that threatens with hell those who don't believe what they believe or just don't join their cult, right? And we know we've mentioned this many times on this channel, that hell is not so easily. It's not so easy to completely corrupt your humanity in such a way that you enter hell. Okay, but there are those who do it. There are those who do it. Okay, and now this sympathy reaches its theological, at least, pinnacle in questioning why did God create those who He knew will go to hell. Right. So you get this question, and that's the question which is in the video that's linked in the description box. At least I think it is. Should be. Make sure everybody can actually hear me here, right? Yes. Okay. So that question was put to the Salafi Sheikh, right? By this poor woman, this poor girl, and he gives those just ridiculous answers, right? They just say, oh, well, God can do whatever He wants, right? It's His creation. If He wants to throw everyone to hell, He can do that. Which is like it's almost like you're trying to make her doubt more in Islam, right? If that's your answer, right? Yeah. He can do what He wants. He can be unjust if He wants, right? He can and be a tyrant if He wants. It's His creation. Okay, that's just so far removed from any understanding and even sympathy for the woman who's asking this question. That you answer like this, right? She's telling you she has doubts, and you answer like that. Anyway. This question of why did God create those He knew will go to hell, it is another way of exonerating the oppressors, right, and throwing the blame, the ultimate cause of the oppression, on God, right? So those who have they have this sort of idea, like I said, this sympathy for the worst of humanity, right, the cruelest of the cruel, right, those who are lower than beasts, okay, the followers of devils. Right, they have this sympathy for them, right? And now it's sort of like they want to almost exonerate them, right? And say, well, they would not be in hell if it wasn't for God, right? Why did God create them in the first place? Okay, that the ultimate oppression that was from God, that He oppressed them in some way, that He was unjust to them. But of course, that's not the case. وَمَا رَبُّكَ بِظَلَّامٍ لِلْعَبِيدِ. The Quran says over, right? That God is not unjust to the servants. Okay, We have in one verse which I put over here, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَظْلِمُ النَّاسَ شَيْئًا, right? Indeed, Allah does not wrong people at all. He's not unjust to people at all, even in the least. وَلَكِنَّ النَّاسَ أَنفُسَهُمْ يَظْلِمُونَ. But it is people that wrong themselves. Okay, it's people who wrong themselves. God does not wrong people by creating them. Okay, even if they end up going to hell, He has not wronged them by creating them. And we'll come to that. Okay, not only does He do no injustice with respect to what is evil, but is generous with respect to what is good. So you have this other verse, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَظْلِمُ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ. Truly Allah does not do injustice even as much as an atom's weight. Okay, dharra here of course means doesn't mean atom, it means the smallest type of ant. You know, if you've ever seen those incredibly small ants, very, very small. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَظْلِمُ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ وَإِن تَكُ حَسَنَةً, right, يُضَاعِفْهَا وَيُؤْتِ مِن لَدُنْهُ أَجْرًا عَظِيمًا. While if there is good, even a single good deed, He multiplies it and gives from Himself a great reward, a huge reward, عظيمة, right? Those who end up in hell, again, which is not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do to end up in hell, right? Well, I mean, you could say some people find murdering easy, right? But I mean, it reminds me of that scene in one of the James Bond films, right? Where to become a 00, he has to assassinate somebody, right? And the first one, I think it's the first Daniel Craig one, where after he's done his first assassination, he's going to the next one. And the guy who he's about to kill says, "Well, don't worry. The first one is difficult, but the second one is." And he kills him at that point. He goes, "Yeah, the second one is easier, right? The first time you do something like murder, right? It isn't easy. It isn't easy. But they say like sinning, it gets easier every time, right? But the point is, it's not easy to end up in hell. Right? Anyway, so those who end up in hell do not end up in hell because God created them for that. God did not create them for that. No, God created them for His mercy, like in that verse we looked at earlier, right? The sort of the main verse I mentioned earlier. Okay, they end up there because of their own actions, because of their own self-corruption. Okay, He created them for mercy, not for hell, right? They ended up in hell 100% because of themselves. Okay, and there's that part of our verse again. إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ رَبُّكَ وَلِذَلِكَ خَلَقَهُم. Except whom your Lord has given mercy, and it was for that He created them. Okay, He created them to give them mercy, right? He created them to give them mercy. All of humanity. Okay, all of those who differ. All of them were created, just like all of them were created. All of them were created for mercy. So what comes to that as well, when you think back to the verses which say that God is not unjust to people, even the weight of an atom, okay, or sorry, a small ant, right? Or He's not unjust to people even in the least. One of the ways that manifests is that it will be unjust to not create certain people, right? Those who ultimately end up in hell, entirely due to their own actions again, and are punished for those actions, they have as much right, quote unquote, to be created as those who end up in Jannah due to their maintaining their humanity. Okay? God is not going to be unjust to those who will end up in hell by saying, okay, I know you are going to end up in hell, so I'm not going to create you. Okay, that is an injustice towards them. Okay, however slight, you might not see it as an injustice, but it is an injustice. Okay, why should they get to be created and these not get to be created? Okay, based on just because God knows what will ultimately happen, right? What will ultimately happen is their choice. Okay, God is not going to take that choice away from them. Okay, God creating them or not is removed and independent of whether they will go to hell or not. Okay, there is no causal effect, no causal effect whatsoever. Okay, neither does God knowing they will go to hell, cause them to commit the crimes that send them to hell. Any more that God, knowing that the righteous will go to Jannah, causes them to become righteous. Okay, there's no causal effect there. Okay, there's no causal effect. And you cannot have one without the other. You can't have one without the other. Okay, the same free will that the dissonance of hell exercised in life is the same free will that the inhabitants of Jannah exercise to go to Jannah. Okay, so you might as well ask, why would God create people that He knows will end up in hell, in Jannah? Sorry. Okay, it comes down to the same idea. Okay, should He not create them just because He knows they're going to go to Jannah? Right? No, these things are removed. Right? Creating them or not creating them is removed and independent from whether somebody will go to hell or not. Okay, by their own actions. So God knowing someone will end up in Jannah or hell is not the cause of that person ending up in neither Jannah nor hell, right? And so that can't be put on as saying, why did God create them? God created them because He's the creator, right? And He's just in His creating. He's just in His creating. He's not going to be unjust in His creating people. So it is unjust to deny them being created forcefully and remove that option. Okay, that option where they could have gone to Jannah. Okay, because of what He knows, they will choose to do of their free will. Okay, He is the creator of all. All have as much right to be created. Okay, taking that away from them is a form of injustice. And when it comes to, because this is a question that will come up with it, I know. Well, people will say, well, they didn't ask to be created. Well, that's something we don't know, right? We're not sure about that. How do you know you didn't ask to be created? So I believe that both those who end up in Jannah or hell had as much choice to be created to come into this world as each other. Right? Everybody who comes into this world did have a choice to come into this world or not. Right? No, God didn't force creation on anybody. Now we may not remember that, okay, but we don't remember the question, "Am I not your Lord?" Right? That's mentioned in the Quran, right? That God took the souls of Banu Adam, the children of Adam from their backs, and asked them from their backs. Is interesting, not from Adam only, right? From their backs. So it seems like every generation, so people before they come into this world, they ask this question, right? Am I not your Lord? And they say, yes, certainly, right? Those who do. I mean, in those, because of course this verse is being addressed to people alive now, people in this world. So everybody in the world said, yes, certainly. Okay. Now, what about, were there any who said, no, we do not testify that you are our Lord, right? I've taken this sort of to be almost like a permission that nobody comes into this world without admitting that their Lord is God, right? Without admitting that. And those who decide not to take that, they're basically saying, I do not want to come into this world where you are the Lord, right? So they don't come into this world, okay? So that, that's my personal idea on that. But the point is that we don't know, okay? So we don't know if there were some people who didn't. There were those who did not answer in that way, who answered something different, and so were never, created into this world. Okay, so I believe we did have a choice. God did not force creation upon us, nor the trust, which is the next verse I'll talk about. The amana, nor to come into this world where am I not your Lord? We have this verse, it's a very famous verse. إِنَّ عَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالْجِبَالِ فَأَبَيْنَ أَنْ يَحْمِلْنَهَا وَأَشْفَقْنَ مِنْهَا وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانُ إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. Indeed, we offered, right? It wasn't forced. We offered the trust, the amana, to the heavens and the earth and the mountains, and they declined to bear it, okay, and feared it. But man undertook to bear it. Indeed, he was unjust and jahil. And we mentioned jahil, it doesn't mean ignorant, right? Jahal is not the same as ignorance. Now, people sometimes look at this verse and they think it means that the heavens and the earth and the mountains were all there, created already, that God already created them, and then God offered them this amana, right? But it doesn't have to be read that way. Just like the human being, it's not like we were all created and then God offered us this amana. Okay, it could be that this was offered prior to being created. Prior to being created, the human being was offered this, all right, and he accepted this with the conditions mentioned. And the conditions are mentioned. What are they? It is so that, this amana is what? It is so that Allah may punish the hypocrites, men and women, and the mushrikeen and the mushrikat, and Allah may accept repentance from the faithful men and women. Okay, and Allah is ever forgiving, merciful. Okay, that was the amana. Okay, and we all came. I believe we all came in with we all came into it or accepted it with full knowledge, an agreement to the possibilities and the consequences, right? Possibilities and consequences that others rejected, right? Others rejected, other creations rejected it. And it doesn't mean that this is the only creations who offered this, the heavens and the earth and the mountains. I mean, what's obviously being mentioned here is that these are the huge, great creations, and they were worried about it. Okay, it doesn't mean that there were other creations which weren't offered this amana as well. Okay, so it seems, for example, the jinn, right? They were obviously offered this amana as well. Okay, so that comes down to that. So that's what I wanted to mention. Now, let me just go over those points again, sort of in summary. That it is, I would say, it's unjust for God to not create those who would ultimately go to hell, right? Because these things are not linked, right? Both those who will ultimately go to hell and those who will ultimately go to Jannah, they both have as much right to be created as the other, right? Neither has more right to be created than the other. What happens after that, okay, in terms from their own deeds which take them to hell or to Jannah, that is on them, 100% on them, from their actions, okay? Nothing else. As for even just coming into this world, being created, I do believe that we, before coming into this world, we are given a choice, that God doesn't force us to come. You might say to yourself, as I remember saying this to somebody, and he said, I would have never chosen to come into this world. Well, people say that, right? There are people now, I watched this video today of this Jewish person who was at a pro-Palestinian rally, and he's saying, if you had told me when I was 20 that I would ever be at a pro-Palestinian rally, I would have said you're out of your mind. Okay, we don't know. We don't know what you would have done or accepted or not accepted a while ago. And some of this, you can see this in NEDs, and there are some stories attached to that of people just in near-death experiences speaking to angels or spirits who are telling them, hey, don't you remember that you chose, when they ask them, why am I having such a difficult life? They would say, well, you chose to come into this life. Don't you remember? So those are things that you could take or not take as you will. But in terms of God's justice, I do believe that nobody would be forced to come into this world, right? Without, especially not into the test that we have here, without knowing what we're getting into. So that's one thing. Another thing is, of course, the part of the reason why people have this sympathy for those in hell is, again, the religious abuse, which is what I consider it to be, that all religions practice in trying to monopolize salvation by making salvation incumbent upon joining their club, joining their religion, accepting their dogmas. Right? That isn't the case. Quran, as we've mentioned many times, both heaven and hell are due to deeds, actions. And so in the same verse, the same set of verses, all this is at the end of Surah Hud, Surah 11. So, I encourage you to go back and read those last 20 verses or so, or 15, I'm not sure how many. A little while later, you have this verse. وَقُلْ لِلَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ اعْمَلُوا عَلَى مَكَانَتِكُمْ إِنَّا عَامِلُونَ. And say to those who do not believe or do not have faith. So this is for those who do not believe or do not have faith, right? For those who still argue that no, you have to believe, you have to have faith. Well, this is what they've been told. The Prophet has been told to address them how, like this. It's been addressed to tell them, do work. اعملوا على مكانتكم إنا عاملون. Okay, you do your actions, and we will do our actions. Okay, our actions. They're going to be the deciding factor. Okay, اعملوا على مكانتكم إنا عاملون. Okay, and wait. We are also waiting. وانتظروا إنا منتظرون. Right? You wait, and we also will wait. And then it says what? And to Allah belongs the unseen aspects of the heavens and the earth, and to Him will be returned the matter. وَلِلَّهِ غَيْبُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَإِلَيْهِ يُرْجَعُ الْأَمْرُ كُلُّهُ. Right, all of it. To Him will return the matter, all of it. So be in servitude to Him. فَاعْبُدْهُ وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَيْهِ, and put your reliance upon Him. وَمَا رَبُّكَ بِغَافِلٍ, and your Lord is not unmindful of what you do. What you do. Okay, actions. وَمَا رَبُّكَ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. Right? This is part of, this could be all, and of course in the translation here we have this, as if this part only is a speech commanded to the Prophet, but it could be the whole thing, right? That this has been addressed, the whole part is being addressed to those who don't have any faith, okay? That your Lord is not unmindful of what you do. So you do and we do, okay, actions. And another verse, وَقُلْ اعْمَلُوا فَسَيَرَى اللَّهُ عَمَلَكُمْ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Okay, and say, do your actions, okay, do as you will. For Allah will see your deeds, He will see your deeds, right? Not your, He won't check your belief, right? See your deeds, and so will His messenger, and so will the faithful. So we're not addressing the faithful, we're not addressing the quote-unquote believers, right? وستردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. Okay, and you will be returned to the knower of the unseen and the witnessed, and He will inform you of what you used to do. Right? بما كنتم تعملون. That's how we're judged. Okay, and those who will enter hell, they're not the disbelievers, they are the worst in actions, the lowest of the low in actions. Right, and hopefully, with what's happening now in Gaza, people can are maybe starting to see just what that means. Okay, before you can talk about, I used to talk about, for example, those who would just carelessly drop an atomic bomb on cities in Japan, but that's so far away, people don't see it anymore, right? Knowing that it's going to level a whole civilian city, 200,000 people living in there. Men, women, children, babies in prams, and just drop the bomb on them. Okay, these are the worst of actions, the worst of human beings who would actually do that, contemplate that, right? So callous, so removed, But now people, some people might start to get it when they're seeing what's happening right now. Another verse here: إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يُلْحِدُونَ فِي آيَاتِنَا لا يخفون علينا. Indeed, those who inject deviation, I'm just going to keep that as inject deviation, let's go over that, into our verses, are not concealed from us. Okay? أَفَمَنْ يُلْقَى فِي النَّارِ خَيْرٌ أَمَّنْ يَأْتِي آمِنًا يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. Okay, so is he who is cast into the fire better, or he who comes secure comes to us, to God, secure on the day of judgment, on the day of resurrection? Then what does it say? اعملوا ما شئتم. Do whatever you will. Do whatever you will. Okay? do whatever actions you will. Okay, إنه بما تعملون بصير. Indeed, he sees what you do. He is seeing what you do, and that will decide what you do. Will decide whether you're going to be thrown into hell, right? أفمن يلقى في النار خير, or if you're going to come to God on Judgment Day, secure, in full security, آمنا. Okay, and this is sort of like a final sort of parting message for what's happening in Gaza now. This is what in the great tragedy of Karbala, what Zainab, the daughter of Ali, and Fatima said at the end of that massacre. And what happened? She said, "Inna mimma yahawin alayna annana biya'yunika ya Rab." Truly, of what makes this easier for us to bear is that we are under your gaze, right? That you are seeing what's happening to us, okay? And part of that is going back to what we said, that there's a mercy in that those who commit such heinous crimes, the cruel, they will be punished, okay? The mercy of hell is that the cruel will be punished. It is a mercy, right? So that's it. That's all I have today. Go back to the screen and see what we have here. All right. Assalamu alaikum. Let me just look through the comments. There's nobody backstage. If anybody wants to come on, please do so. Let me just have a look. If you had a question in the chat, I'll try to scan for it now. Otherwise, maybe just copy and paste it. Copy and paste it again so I can see it easier. Assalamualaikum Muhammad. Hamid, good to see you. Surah. Yeah. Iron Man, yes. Miss him too. What happened to him? Yeah, he came, I think, a couple of weeks ago, right? He was on of this, not last time, but the time before last. Assalamu alaikum, perfect dawah. Good to see you. The undeserved sympathy is because of people of other religions, for example, layman who is Buddhist, etc., are portrayed as villains and evil and condemned to universal little bit of hell. That's a nice phrase, huh? Universal little bit of hell. Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, that's again what I would consider to be just that kind of religious abuse, right? That people are being told what is just completely at odds with their fitrah. That they will look at somebody from another religion, a Buddhist or somebody, whoever it is, okay, and your scholar, your sheikh, your priest, your rabbi will tell them, those people, yeah, they're going to hell. Why? Why are they going to hell? Did they do anything wrong? No, they just don't believe what we believe. That's why. Okay, that is abuse, right? And again, that sympathy, it comes from ignorance and it also comes from naivety, right? The naivety part of it is that you accept that sort of idea that they will go to hell for what? For nothing. Okay, so unfortunately, people are cowed into accepting this, right? You have to understand that most of the religious leaders are not very, they're not the most intelligent of people usually. So yeah, so if a person of other religion, just because he is from non-Muslim faith, yeah, the Muslim extremists portray themselves as villains. Yeah. They portray even Muslims of monotheistic faith as villains. Okay, the extremists, they if you're a mubtadi', right, they consider you to be an innovator, even though you're monotheist in faith. That's still the same thing, right? What did they say? That this ummah will divide into 73 sects, all of them in hell except one, that sort of stuff, right? Yokas says, you do know some Sunnis claim that Christians and Jews go to hell automatically, but it says in Surah 2 that they can achieve Jannah by their actions. They say verse, yeah, exactly. They say it's abrogated. And they say it's abrogated because a lot of things. I mean, how those things came about is a strange thing, right? part of it has to do with what happened, right? Historically, the Arabs conquered, right? They call them the Muslim conquest, but most of them were not Muslim conquests; they were Arab conquests. And to get people to go and conquer those other people, you have to make them um, as people. You have to dehumanize them, right? Make them evil, make them people of hell, etc. Okay. And so, of course, then that happened, right? There were a lot of the Crusades and these things. The Muslims went invading, trying as best they could to invade Europe and North Africa and these places. They didn't invade southwards in Africa, right? If you look at the map, they just went west. They didn't go down. Why? Because, well, to put it bluntly, um, seeking of wealth and racism as well, right? So the money the money was in Europe, right? And sub-Saharan Africa wasn't wealthy, and they didn't care about them as if they cared about people become Muslim anyway. But they didn't even try to make a pretense they were conquering sub-Saharan Africa to bring Islam there. No, they wanted the wealth and the women of Europe, right? To put it bluntly like that, and they didn't want there was no wealth, nor did they want the women of sub-Saharan Africa. Yeah, exactly. Submission to God as Arab clothes, name, cuisine, covering the face, black abaya, length of pants, Arabic language. Anyway. Yeah, superstition of religion. Difference between shirk and mushrik. So a mushrik is somebody who is that's his state. I mean, shirk is I've mentioned this before that shirk is about ibadah to others with God. Right? Shirk is about ibadah, being in servitude to others with God. Right? Somebody can commit an act of shirk, and that will not be forgiven. It will always end up in the scales on Judgment Day. But the person might not be a mushrik. The person himself might not be a mushrik. The person who is a mushrik is the person who has made that his religion. Right? It's basically that's his allegiance. His allegiance is to the shirk that he's committing to, the shariks, to those who he set up as partners of Allah. Okay, he's put all of his allegiance in that, right? Deen, the word deen, doesn't just mean religion, it also means allegiance. Right? It also means that, like the laws that you follow, the rules that you follow, your allegiance, like in Surah Yusuf, ما كان ليأخذ أخاه في دين الملك إلا إن شاء الله شيئا, was of him to take his brother in allegiance, in the laws of the king, right? So when Yusuf wanted to take his brother away from the other brothers, right? He couldn't do that under the laws of the king, right? According to his allegiance to the king, except with that trick, right? That trick which was that he made it out as if his brother had stolen, and then he asked them, okay, what is the judgment? What is your, when they denied it, they said, what is the judgment? What is your judgment if we find out that he stole? And they said, well, our judgment, the way we would judge it, is that the person who stole is given to the victim, to the person he stole from. Like he's given to him as a slave anyway. That's the background for that. Right. So mushrik is somebody who it's not just he's doing it once. Okay, that's his entire state. Right. He will fight for his idols. He will fight for them. And he stands by them, he justifies for them, and he does all of that. Okay, that is mushrik, is his state of shirk. Assalamu alaikum. See you. Farhiya Ahmed. Yeah, Asim al Hakim. Yeah, that's the Salafi who said that. Yes. So I wouldn't, I try to avoid the word worship because then people think it's the rituals of worship, right? It isn't about worship; it's about ibadah, right? The word worship just doesn't encompass the word ibadah, right? It is about ibadah. So, for example, I've mentioned this again before. But Israel, they worshipped the golden calf, okay, but they were not in ibadah to it. They were not in ibadah to the golden calf. The Quran, over and over, specifically avoids ibadah and shirk in describing what Bani Israel did with the golden calf. They are never said to have been in ibadah to it. They are never said to have done shirk with it. Okay, what's mentioned is ikaf, right? The rituals. They were engaged in rituals to it. They did take it as an ilah. They did take it as an ilah, but again, that is not the same as as shirk. Ah, I'm at the end of it. The end of the comments. All right, brilliant. I say here, do you think Abu Bakr and Umar were rightly guided? No, I mean, these titles are ridiculous. Rightly guided caliphs, right? What does that mean? That God guided him? No, God didn't guide any of them specifically, right? God sent guidance. He sent guidance with the Quran, with the Prophet, and those who followed it. Okay, in following that, they were guided, and where they deviated from that, they were not guided. Okay, it just comes down that simply. Abu Bakr and Umar had some positive qualities and some very negative qualities as well, right? And so things after the Prophet, things started to go haywire bit by bit, right? And I mentioned it in my video, I think in the previous video, the one about the second part to my response to Dr. Jonathan Brown, and I still need to follow up for the next parts. But I mentioned it before that the most critical junction in any ummah, in any nation which was set up by God, which had a prophet, okay, the most critical junction is after that prophet dies. Okay, that point is make or break. That point is make or break. Right? That's why in Surah Maryam Zakaria, he asks for a waliya, right? Yarithini, he asks for somebody to take over after him. He says, I'm afraid of the rabble after me, what they will do. Okay? In the same way the Prophet was afraid of because there was this huge influx of basically hypocrites. If you read the last few surahs of the Quran, you see what's happening. That there was this huge movements and shifts of disobedience against the Prophet, right? And there was an influx of hypocrites. The Surah Tawbah, which is the second to last surah revealed, is heavily critical of the people around the Prophet. Okay, of the people in Medina. It mentions, it speaks very harshly against the hypocrites. The very last surah, Surah Al-Ma'idah, talks about those who have faith in their who profess faith with their tongues but don't have faith in their hearts, and who conspire and who do this and who do that, right? So the Prophet was very worried when the end of his life came, and he was ignored. The last few months of his life, he was basically ignored by most of the people, right? Till at the end of his, in his sick bed, he asks, let me write down something for you to keep you together. And Omar basically says no, right? Says he's been mad or he's doing this, and now he says, "Oh, the Quran is enough for us." Okay, then it's people don't understand that his saying that was just to ward off what the Prophet wanted to write, which was, of course, his what he said in Ghadir Khum. It was the same thing that he said in Ghadir Khum. He was going to have written down there, but he'd made it clear in Ghadir Khum. And still, people were sort of against that, right? It was Quraysh mostly and Banu Umayyah, Banu Makhzum, and Banu Salim. But yeah, okay, so Umar said, in the book of Allah is enough for us. Yet as soon as the Prophet dies, you disinherit his daughter based on a hadith, right? What happened to the Quran was enough for us then, okay? And then, the Saqifa and, the taking of the leadership and saying that, we are the leaders and you Ansar will be our helpers. And then afterwards, neither Abu Bakr nor Umar nor Uthman ever put any of the Ansar in any positions of real leadership. Instead, they brought back the old alliance of Quraysh and Thaqif, who were the last two big tribes to become Muslim. Right? The old Jahiliyyah alliance between Thaqif and Quraysh, that came back. Right? Abu Bakr and Umar brought that back. And then there was the incident of Abu Bakr when Khalid bin Walid did what he did in killing the wife of Malik, and the famous story. And it was basically it was an exact repeat of what happened during the Prophet's lifetime. What did the Prophet do? The Prophet said, "Oh Allah, I'm innocent of you from what Khalid has done." Right? He blasted Khalid, really blamed him for that. He sent Ali with a huge amount of money to go to the tribe and give them pay off the blood debt, right, for the people that Khalid had killed. And he removed the Jahiliyyah, as the Prophet told him, go over this wealth, sort this mess out that Khalid has made, and وَجَعَلْ أَمْرَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ تَحْتَ قَدَمَيْكَ, and put the affairs of the Jahiliyyah beneath your feet, stamp them out. Right? Then when during Abu Bakr's time, Khalid bin Walid did exactly the same thing. But when the family of the wronged came to Abu Bakr seeking redress, Abu Bakr refused to give it to them. Right? He refused to give it to them. So, there was good and there was bad in them. I mean, I know I'm just mentioning a lot of the bad, but that's because in Sunni Islam, they've basically been uplifted high above their, sort of not their due, but it's a fantasy. Basically, it's not real. All these huge virtues that they were these amazing. No, they were sort of like middling. Right? They weren't the best of the Sahaba. They were by no means the worst. And they set the trend for a lot of other things. Anyway, I don't want to make this into too much into a discussion of the early history. The early history is a problem, and the Ummah could have done fine, right? It didn't have to be Ali in the leadership, right? If they had stuck with the Quran, right? The Quran would have been enough. But the issue is when you have people taking leadership which take you away from the Quran, then that's a big problem. It's a big problem, especially in the beginning. How can what does it say? How can it be the Prophet who was at his politically most strongest? How can he be ignored at that point? Well, he was ignored. He wasn't at his politically strongest because he wasn't a tyrant. I mean, you say he's politically strongest. What did he force people? He never forced anybody. He wasn't a tyrant over people. He spent how long was it? 2 weeks telling the army to go. The army of Usama, right? Go. And every time they come and they make an excuse. They disobeyed him, right? They disobeyed him. Because people knew he was dying, right? They knew he was dying. And so they wanted to be there to throw in their weight for what would happen afterwards. Okay? And it's mentioned also in the Quran, right? That the people were disobeying him in Surah Al-Mujadila, I think, which talks about the Najwa, which says, do you not see those people? This was when everybody was Muslim, apparently. Like when the verse says, "Do you not see those people who were prohibited from having these secret gatherings, and having these secret gatherings in disobedience in God and His Messenger. So they يتناجون بالإثم والعدوان ومعصية الرسول. They conspire in order to disobey the Prophet, right? So they read the last two surahs to be revealed from the Quran, and you tell me then that the Prophet was as his politically most strongest, or that everybody was rushing to obey him. No, well, that wasn't the case at all. There were huge things happening all around. Anyway. I'm going to be the one. Why did Muawiyah select his son Yazid as successor? Because he was a hypocrite, basically. Muawiyah was a hypocrite, and he wanted it to become a family dynasty. He wanted to have a family dynasty. Simple as that, really. It doesn't add up that the third person who accepted Islam, Abu Bakr, wasn't from the best. He wasn't among the first to accept Islam. If you investigate it, there's a lot of narrations talking about who were the first to accept Islam, and among the narrations are those which say that 50 people accepted Islam before Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr and Umar were just among the elders, right? Most of the people who accepted Islam were young, right? They were young people, very young. The very young people, or the slaves and the downtrodden, these people. But from the people who were sort of like who were not slaves and who were not young, there was very few, and Abu Bakr was among them. So that's why he became. The Arabs very much prioritize seniority, right? The person who's older is a person who leads, right? When Abu Talib was alive, he was the chief of Banu Hashim, and he protected all of the Muslims from Banu Hashim, and he protected the Prophet, right? And people could not harass the Prophet very easily. Okay, when Abu Talib died, the person who became the chief of the Banu Hashim by default was Abu Lahab, right? Was and he didn't care, right? So why did he become the person who hated the Prophet most in Banu Hashim ended up becoming the chief, right? And he barely gave any protection at all to the Muslims, to the Prophet. The Prophet was harassed and attacked and things like this. But it's because he's the next oldest, right? And that's how it's very tribal society. You must remember that, very tribal. You survive by being part of your tribe, right? And the tribe survives by it doesn't get cut up and split up into sub tribes and infighting. This by the person who's the leader is the eldest, usually, right? The eldest person, the one with the most honor, or from the best family, the eldest person there. He's the person who is going to be the leader. So Abu Talib's brother, Abu Lahab, becomes the de facto leader. And so, the same thing sort of happened even among the Muslims. The elder Sahaba are given, are deferred to, whether they were the best or not. And also, don't forget that people change, right? So, Abu Bakr had a lot of excellent moments, but you don't need to think that people are the same for 20 years and that nothing changes, right? The Quran talks about, for example, those who believe and then disbelieve, then believed and disbelieved, then disbelieved and increased in disbelief, not belief, kufr, right? الذين آمنوا ثم كفروا ثم آمنوا ثم كفروا ثم ازدادوا كفرا. Okay, who are the examples of these? Who are these people? The Quran mentions them, right? That there were people who had faith, then went to kufr, then had faith again, then went to kufr, then went into kufr again, and then increased in kufr. We don't know a single one of them, right? Who are examples? The Quran talks about the hypocrite women, munafiqat. Who are these hypocrite women? We don't have a single example. Okay, so there's a lot of history. History is written by the victors. Remember that. Okay, history is written by the victors and for the victors. Yeah, I mean, when we talk about Islam in that kind of way, we're just talking about Muhammad in Islam, right? So yes, you're right. Islam has always existed, but there's a Jewish Islam, there's the Christian Islam, there's the Islam of Ibrahim, there's Islam of Nuh, there's the Islam. You know, Islam just means submission, but what we're talking here about sort of the religion, quote unquote, of Muhammad Islam, or the Sharia of the Prophet Muhammad, or you know that iteration of Islam. Yes, exactly, right. So you know, it's sometimes though the history, understanding the history helps people to untangle that. There are some people, you know, I haven't done that much on this channel, but there are some people who will not be able to see the Quran until you remove, until you can knock down the idols surrounding it. Okay, sometimes you have to, people have to see and understand the lies they were told are lies before they start to see the truth. I mean, just look what's happening now with the whole Gaza and Israel, right? There are people who are starting to see that the Palestinians are really oppressed. They're only starting to see that now when they are starting to see the lies of Israel, right? And it just happens that way, unfortunately. But yes, you can easily leapfrog over all of this stuff just to the Quran to get your guidance, right? To get your guidance. That doesn't mean there isn't a lot to learn from the history. There's a lot to learn from the history, right? And how we got here, and you know what went wrong, and how things changed, and you know, it helps you sort out narrations if you want to understand what happened and didn't happen, what could possibly the prophet might have said, might not have said. These things are all important. If I recall, there's only one qira'ah according to you, because the prophet is taught. Yeah, so I don't believe that there is multiple qira'at that the prophet recited or taught people to recite in multiple ways. That's just it's just not true. The narration, they want to say that the narrations about the 7 ahruf are mass transmitted. They are not mass transmitted. It's just not true. What happened is because, of course, the qira'at differentiated so much. We had this huge number of qira'at happening. You needed justification. So because a justification came up in this lie of the 7 ahruf hadith, of course, I got transmitted a lot along with the need. Because there's a need, people would ask why there are these different qira'at. So, of course, hadith gets pulled up. And so because of that, it proliferated. The 7 ahruf hadith proliferated because of the reality of the proliferation of qira'at. Okay? But it's ridiculous to believe that Umar ibn al-Khattab, you know, if you look at the main hadith about this, the Umar ibn al-Khattab, right, didn't know anything about 7 ahruf right up to the conquest of Mecca, because the hadith happened in the conquest of Mecca, after the conquest of Mecca. How do we know that? Because the person who Umar saw reciting Surah Al-Furqan differently was one of the Tuluqa, one of those who became Muslim after the conquest of Mecca, right? So then Umar sees him reciting the Quran differently, says, Where did you learn that? He says, I learned it from the Prophet. And he says, you lied because the Prophet told me the surah and he told me to recite it differently from you. So he drags them off to the Prophet. And so then the Prophet decides to tell them about 7 ahruf. Is that how it goes? So the Prophet have waited for this fitna, for this difference to occur before telling people, oh, by the way, the Quran is revealed in 7 ahruf and I've been secretly teaching different people these different ahruf. I mean, come on, right? It's ridiculous. You know, that for 20 plus years, right? You know, Umar was a Muslim. You know, he wasn't that close of a person in Mecca, to be honest. Okay, in Mecca, he didn't have as much interaction with the Prophet as people think, right? There was the boycott. There was a lot of things that happened, but the point is, he still knew about him, and he was still Muslim from when he converted to during the whole of the Meccan period, and then the whole of the Medina period, and all of this time he's completely ignorant about there being 7 ahruf, about there being 7 ways of reciting the Quran, which nobody understands what that means. That hadith, nobody understands what that means. Right? Scholars say it's from the mutashabihat, right? As if the Prophet has mutashabihat. He sent the whole ummah for a curveball, give them a curveball in that hadith. So 1,400 years, all the scholars are scratching their heads. What does this mean? The Quran is revealed in 7 ahruf. It doesn't mean anything because it's nonsense. Right? It didn't happen. The Prophet, why recite the Quran in 7 ahruf? Oh, because the Arabs needed it. Some Arabs needed the Quran to be recited in this way. Allah says He's made the Quran easy. Okay? He didn't say, I made this qira'ah easy for this tribe and this qira'ah easy for this tribe. No. And right now, forget Arabs needing different recitations. Right now, non-Arabs, non-Muslims, you've got Japanese in Japan who find it easy to recite in Hafs. Right now, the whole world, okay, finds it easy to recite the Hafs. Okay? And what the Arab tribes needed different qira'at, okay, because it was difficult for them to recite in one, but the whole world right now can recite in one. Okay, Chinese, Japanese, Brazilians, Spanish people, right? English, of course, Indo-Pakistan, Urdu speakers. All of these people learn to recite the Quran, and they learn to recite it without even understanding what it means. They don't know Arabic. They can't speak any Arabic. They can't understand any Arabic, but they can recite the Quran normally, right? Easily, they learn to recite it. It's one of the blessings of the Quran. Allah's made it easy, right? All of these, take some Aborigines people from Australia or the Amazon jungle. They'll be able to recite the Quran. You don't need, if that was really the case, then the Quran should have been sent with enough ahruf for the whole of humanity. What was that? Right, it should be sent with ahruf for the whole of humanity, right? Different ahruf for all the possibilities that people could speak. Anyway, so yeah, it's nonsense. I mean, I don't know if there's a follow-up question to this. Yes, exactly. I mean, we mentioned this about Islam as well, that I think it's in the video which has the thumbnail of Andrew Tate, right? That you don't becoming Muslim. There's no such thing as really converting to Islam. There is making a tawbah to Islam, right? You're supposed to becoming Muslim is supposed to be a tawbah. It's supposed to be a tawbah. It isn't you just say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah and now all of your sins are wiped clean, and you've joined the club. No, that isn't it. It's supposed to be a tawbah. It's supposed to be a repentance, right? You're supposed to right your wrongs and turn around. What's happened in Umar and the Prophet? No, this was about, I think we're talking here about the 7 ahruf hadith. Just look them up online. The whole issue of the qira'at. If you want to do a deep dive, there's actually a good set of videos it's called a playlist see if I can find it. If you want to really understand the qira'at, of course, he's not being critical here. He's giving you the standard, actually, what scholars have known always about the qira'at and the different opinions and stuff like this. He's a Salafi. It's a Salafi channel, but he actually does this very well. He's actually very good at explaining things, even though, of course, I'll be completely at odds with this guy. It's from this YouTube channel called Al Madrasat Al Umariyah, the Umari school, right? So I'll put that into the chat. So if you really want to understand the issues of the qira'at, then start by listening to this. I mean, it's not critical. You can probably think of the critical issues yourself while listening to this, but it's a long playlist, but he goes into detail about the whole of the qira'at and the ahruf and stuff like that. Okay, so the videos are around 20 minutes long or up to half an hour sometimes, and altogether there's how many videos do you have here? 22 videos. Okay, but they go into detail about the whole issue of the qira'at, and it's just one of the opinions of many, and it's just listen to it yourself and with a critical mind, but listen to it yourself, take some notes, and you can start to understand what is that about. All right, okay, so that's here. If anybody wants that, it's there. Okay, I think we'll end this here. It's late where I am, and usually we do these on Saturdays. I did it today because I couldn't get it done yesterday, and tomorrow I have work, so we'll end it there. Just have a quick question here. The Quran is essentially a book describing human archetypes and characteristics. Yes, I would say that. It discusses the heart, right? Discusses the heart, right? But what is your opinion about many Quran copies were burnt by Uthman? Yeah, I don't believe that happened. Uthman ordered it, it seems, but I don't see any evidence for that at all. He didn't enforce it. The people in Kufa, for example, didn't do it, right? Ibn Mas'ud was adamant. He was telling people, hide your copies of the Quran. Al-Hajjaj did something, though. He did actually go around paying people for their copies of the Quran and taking them off them. But Uthman didn't do anything. And when people revolted against Uthman, among the people who revolted against him, there were those who accused him of burning the Quran. Right? These are people who came from Kufa, I suppose, mostly from Kufa. So of course they wouldn't have burnt their copies of the Quran. If they're accusing him of doing it as a sin, and that means they wouldn't have done it themselves. So I don't see that. I don't see any narrations of mass burning of Quranic material at all. That people would give up. It just didn't happen. So I don't believe that. And also the mass copying, I don't see that either. I don't see any narrations, because we don't look, the copies that Uthman made, right? We don't even know what happened to them. They very, very quickly vanish. We don't know where they went or anything about them, to be honest, right? Which shows that people didn't care, right? People forget how low public opinion was on Uthman and the whole Ummah. Right? The whole Ummah pretty much hated him, right? And that was turned around later. If you go now to Medina, the only grave that the authorities will tell you, we know this grave is Uthman, is Uthman's grave. And if you check, some people just don't notice it, they don't think to observe that. But if you go to the grave in Medina, you'll see that most of the main graves that the locals will tell you, we know who these graves are. That's the grave of the wives of the Prophet. There's the grave of Fatima. There's the grave of Hassan. That's the grave of Imam Malik, Imam Nafi. All these people are close to the Prophet's mosque. Uthman's grave is far away, okay, far away from everybody else, right? You would think that he'd lived, you know, he died 500 years later. The reason why he's far away is because he wasn't buried in the Muslim cemetery. Okay, the Caliph Uthman was not buried in the Muslim cemetery. The people of Medina refused to let him be buried in the Muslim cemetery. He was buried in the old rubbish dump, in the rubbish dump area, basically, which was basically the old Jewish cemetery. Okay, later on, one of the caliphs said to enlarge the Muslim cemetery to include Uthman within it. Okay, but he was not even so. He was ignored. I mean, then the whole thing about the 4 copies, we don't even know how many copies he made and how many copies he sent. Not really, right? Not from our tradition, at least. There are those who work with manuscripts who can identify now that there were 4 copies made. Okay, but that doesn't come from us being, sure based on our history or narrations. Some narrations say he made 4 copies, some say he made 5 copies, some say he made 6, some say he made 7. Right? We don't know. Okay, how is it that we don't know? I mean, those copies that Uthman made should be in our museums right now, but we don't know where a single one ended up, and we don't have any narrations of anybody copying from them. There's no narrations of somebody saying, "I must have my copy. I copied from the copy that Uthman sent to Kufa or to Basra or to Mecca or to Syria." We don't have that. Right? Imam Malik, 2 generations away from the Prophet, was asked what happened to the copy of Uthman. He said it's lost. Okay, why is it lost? Lost because nobody cared. Nobody cared. Right? So I don't believe he was that there was mass burning of the Quran. I don't think that happened. Nor does it seem that there was mass copying. Copying definitely happened. People copied, like we know that from the stemma that we see in the manuscripts. But I have my own theory about how that came about. I'm not convinced that it was because of 4 copies that were sent out and everybody was queuing up to copy from those 4 copies. And we don't see that in narrations, and I think we can have another explanation for it. Anyway, okay, so I guess I'll end that there. Thanks, Perfect Dawa. Hope you're well. And thanks everybody else for tuning in and for the questions. And see you inshallah in a couple more weeks. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.